everyone knows rowing. It's not new. What we found though was the rowing machines out there, they haven't changed in a long time. That machine with a hard seat, it's pretty loud, it's low to the ground, and it really caters to a very niche group. And so we wanted to bring rowing to the general public and make it more accessible for more people. What makes us different or unique is that we use gaming psychology and game design to make that experience really fun. Some people even say addictive.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Andy Hoang, founder and CEO of Aviron, makers of connected rowing machine. In this episode, we discuss the company's bootstrap start, pivoting from commercial sales to at-home during the pandemic, and Aviron's approach to gamified fitness content. Let's get into it. Hi, Andy. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. Excited to be here.
Yeah, let's just jump right into it. Certainly a lot to talk about, from fitness trends to connected equipment at home. And just to kick things off, can you introduce yourself and Aviron?
Absolutely. So my name is Andy. I'm founder and CEO of Aviron, and Aviron is a connected game-based rowing machine. We focus on fitness entertainment. So that includes things like streaming. We even have coach classes, games, races, virtual rows. But what makes us different or unique is that we use gaming psychology and game design to make that experience really fun. Some people even say addictive.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a lot of different things that have happened. It feels like a long time, but a short amount of time in terms of like the equipment, connected equipment at home, smart training, all that stuff. Certainly the gaming and game design adding another element to it, but you guys have been at it for a minute, right? When did you start the company, and how have things kind of maybe accelerated, sped up in recent years?
Yeah, we were just talking about this before. We're probably one of the first companies to market. I think we're established in 2018, but we were a lot different back then. We bootstrapped our way to our first $1 million in sales. So it was just a grind, and part of bootstrapping means you can't really penetrate the market like you would if you had funding. So we didn't go after consumers. We went after your standard vertical market. So things like gyms and hotels and apartments and things like that.
And so making the jump from, bootstrapping, trying to figure out, basically it's like wherever you can go with the budget you have, right? And kind of like making things work on a much shorter, right? Timeline and budget, to then starting to raise money, build out the team and expand. How did you initially make that transition, and how has it gone?
Yeah, and I'll be pretty frank. It was a grind. Like anybody that's bootstrapping a business, and then a lot of people that are listening are probably bootstrapping their business, it is, exponentially harder. We pivoted because it was a necessity. So our business started picking up, and we started doing a little bit better in the beginning of 2020, but that's when COVID hit. So, our B2B market was really taking a hit. So hotels were closing down, gyms, condos, things like that. So we really had to pivot, or we were pretty much going to go bankrupt. And I was also reluctant to move into the consumer side because, I didn't have too much experience, and that's like a whole new world. There's a lot to learn when you're selling to consumers. And not only just like the sales part, supporting the customers, being available for them from a tech support and logistics standpoint was quite challenging. But we pivoted in mid 2020, I'd say July 2020. And then we just started getting a little bit of traction, and we were learning how to kind of operate the business. Fortunately for us, we applied to Y Combinator, got into that program, and that's really when, the doors opened and we got into the investor community. We raised a seed round early that year, and it's been a rocket ship since. Then we raised our Series A shortly after that, and then we did a venture debt round. We're about to sign a term sheet for venture debt as well, so that's exciting.
Yeah, making moves, and certainly have navigated that pretty exceptionally to be able to turn the corner from hey, we might go bankrupt. Oh, by the way, there's a pandemic, and we have to figure out a completely new business model to now continuing to accelerate. Just to give us a sense of kind of how things have grown, how big is the team? How much funding have you raised to date? And how are you thinking about then continuing to accelerate that growth?
Yeah, the team is it's a yeah. I don't think we have a huge team. I look at our competitors, and everyone has these monster numbers. We have a modest about 40 employees. We're constantly looking for great people. Last year at this time, we're about maybe a quarter or a third that size. So it is like a good amount of growth. So we raised 4.5 million in our seed round. We probably did around 500,000 in our pre-seed, which is really just friends and family, my own money. And then our Series A was an $18.5 million, led by Stripe out of New York, great investor. And then, we're not finalized yet, but we're looking around $5 to $7 million in venture debt.
Nice. Yeah. Certainly helpful. But with the investment comes, you just have to work that much harder and kind of grow that much faster. What has the experience been like, making that transition from trying to get product into market right during the pandemic when demand was basically at its peak? And now, and you can talk about what you're experiencing, but across the broader industry, some folks pointing to maybe a slowdown, or maybe some of that demand was pulled forward and now consumers aren't maybe spending and buying at home equipment at the same rate. What are you experiencing, and what has that like kind of pendulum been like, or maybe even like ping pong ball back bouncing back and
Yeah,
forth
yeah.
between those two extremes?
Yeah, it's crazy landscape, and like my perspective is that this industry is here to stay. And the reason why I say that is because Peloton, obviously they're going through a tough time right now. Pre-pandemic they had raised $1 billion, so they were growing, at an exponential pace. So this is something that I feel is going to stick around. It's not just fueled by the pandemic, but the pandemic probably accelerated things a little bit. It's wild right now. Full transparency, like we're lucky we raised our round when we did. So those that aren't in the investment community, like there's no way. Like most companies trying to raise their Series A right now are in a lot of hurt. Valuations are probably down at least 40%. And from what I hear, it depends on what industry you're in, but if you're in the consumer industry like we are and in hardware, it's almost impossible to get funding right now. And if you're lucky enough to get funding, it's going to be at a depressed valuation. Yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty, and we're expecting to get into a recession. So having a good amount of runway is important. But yeah, like there's just I can't say like we have these expectations we're going to blow numbers out of the water, but at the same time we're seeing a consumer sentiment going down. It's getting harder to acquire customers, but at the same time it's seasonality. Like we're not really sure what's going on. That's kind of the truth.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I appreciate you being direct about it. It's like, don't have all the answers, but at the same time, that doesn't mean just because the unsustainable like pandemic peak is no longer the norm, it doesn't mean people aren't working out at home and there's not going to be demand for this type of product. So I think it's interesting, and it's being smart about how you're thinking about building the company and deploying capital and charting that course forward. It's like, as you mentioned, I don't think a lot of people think about it like this, but Peloton was founded way before the pandemic, and they were doubling sales every year until I think the most recent quarters when they started to see their downturn. And that was kind of, maybe because they got a little too far forward on their skis and not necessarily indicative of at-home fitness. So
yeah, I'll add to that. I think a lot like what's happened in the last couple of years is it's been a bull market, right? There's a lot of capital in the market, and what that means is you can operate a business less efficiently. And I think if there is a recession coming, it's important that as a business owner you have the right unit economics, you have the right metrics in terms of your churn, your retention, your growth rate. But like last year, it didn't matter as much if you were losing, X amount of dollars. It was most important that you were hitting these sales metrics, and that gave you that high valuation. You could raise more capital, and then therefore you could hire more people than you actually needed. I think now it's going to be different, and those companies that are pretty much overspending and not really watching their unit economics are going to have a bit of a tougher time, and then we might weed out some of the bad companies.
That's how it goes. That's how those cycles work. And it's almost as if having that experience bootstrapping at the onset will benefit you as you think about what it's like tightening the belt and kind of getting back to the fundamentals.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a ton of companies, and I don't have to tell you, like companies that have a ton of employees and they're just hiring and they're spending lots on marketing, but maybe they don't have the traction yet, like they should. So we're gonna see what's gonna happen in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of the specifics around both the equipment and like the content aspects. But since we're on the topic, what is working, or maybe what channels are you seeing success with in terms of acquisition? Is it primarily social and like figuring out those ads and kind of hacking that, LTV in conversion, or is it more so? I'm sure there's an element, right, of like word of mouth and just getting the brand out there and getting it in front of more people.
Yeah, and great question. For our industry specifically, it's not an easy question to answer because the sales cycle is very long. It's a high consideration product. And so, it's not like you're selling a t-shirt where someone sees the ad, clicks on it, and 2 days later they buy, right? So it might be 12 months before they make that buying decision. And so during that 12-month process, they're at the top of the funnel and they're looking at PR, they're looking at reviews on YouTube, they're going to your Facebook group and, talking to your customers. So it's hard to say, one channel is really important or more important than another channel because it's so hard to attribute where these sales are coming from. But what I will say is like, it's important for any connected fitness company or any company in the e-commerce space to continue testing. We're literally just looking for new channels every single month or quarter. So we're going to do TikTok, we're going to do Pinterest, we're doing connected TV. What's obviously worked really well is going to be your standard Facebook and Instagram and Google and YouTube. But what's gotten us here is not going to get us to the next level. So, and what's gotten us here may not work a month from now. So we're not only testing new channels, but then you got to figure out the language and messaging. So to give you a really good example, during the pandemic, using the messaging around working out at home was really strong. People didn't want to go to the gym. They wanted to stay at home. But you can't use that same messaging now. So what's worked for you like 8 months ago, it's definitely not going to work for you now. And so you're constantly testing.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Maybe zooming out a little bit, we were kind of in the weeds there for a minute, but even just talking about, the rower in general and that not being like a new modality, right? You have like the old school concept two, which is kind of like the pioneer in the space, but also even as someone who has one and uses one, like it only does kind of like that one thing. And if you don't have the discipline to, kind of get in that seat, which is not comfortable, right? And just row and, totally crush yourself. Like I can see how it's not going to be appealing to a lot of people. But at the same time, super efficient, full body workout, like all those things that maybe people don't realize. How did you come to the rower and then like add that element of the gamified content?
Yeah, so and you nailed it, right? Like rowing is such a great modality. It is something that I think more, like you go to any gym, you're going to see a rower. Whether someone is on it is another question, right?
Or using it correctly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a difficult exercise in terms of like if you just look at this machine, you're like it's pretty daunting to get on for the first time. So there's a few things that we thought about. One, when we were thinking about building a product, we want to find a product that had the biggest market opportunity. Spinning is, really saturated. There's a lot of competitors in that market. But rowing, on the other hand, was one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing modality, thanks to things like Orange Theory and CrossFit. So it was getting a lot more popular. And it's a global sport. Like it's an Olympic sport. Everyone knows rowing. It's not new. And so you go to anywhere around the world, people pretty much understand rowing as well, but it's obviously much smaller. What we found though was rowers, like the rowing machines out there, they haven't changed in a long time, right? Unlike a treadmill or a bike, there's a lot of technological advancements, but rowing really hasn't changed, and it really caters to a very niche group. And those people are mentally, I would say, really strong to be able to sit on that machine, like you said, with a hard seat. It's pretty loud, it's low to the ground, and so we wanted to bring rowing to the general public and make it more accessible for more people. And so if you actually look at our data, 90% of our customers have never rowed more than 2 times in their life before purchasing, and 50% have never rowed at all. So we're really tapping into people that understand the benefits of rowing and making it accessible for everyone.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think, just to that point and getting people in terms of bang for your buck and efficiency, like as opposed to, if you're doing anything, props, like keep doing it. Hopefully you love it and found something that works. But just in terms of like full body engagement and like calories per minute or per workout, like few things stack up to that. And then one of the things, of course, that you added is like when you do get on a rower, there are companies now taking different approaches in terms of what that content looks like. Obviously, you kind of have this like studio based content where it's an instructor or coach. You have the game based content and design that goes with it, and some folks that are just putting like, hey, let's see if we can get Netflix on this thing. And in terms of entertainment, you're doing some elements maybe of all those things. Can you talk about like what the experience is beyond the equipment itself?
Yeah, so I'll start off with like the actual equipment and why, obviously I'm biased. I think it's one of the best rowers in the market, but the people have asked us, like investors have asked, like, why didn't you just create this amazing content, which is the biggest part of our product on, a concept two or a water rower. And the reason is because those rowers they haven't changed and they're designed for rowers. So to give you an example, rowers typically the foot placements are quite narrow because it generates the most power when your feet are closer together. And that is easy when you're not, if you're a big dude or a lady and you got wide hips, like it's not going to be comfortable for you. So we wanted to build a rower that was more accessible. So having wider foot placements, having it so the rail isn't, 4 inches off the ground, but it's 20 inches off the ground. These are some of the features that make our rower more accessible to more people. But then the content is really what separates us. And like you mentioned, we do have a ton of variety, and that's kind of what we want to really focus on is that variety. So everything from streaming services. So we have your Netflix, your Prime, YouTube, other streaming services, Disney. And then we have, on the other spectrum, we have like hardcore games where you're being chased by zombies and you're playing old school Brick Breaker or you're shooting robots. And a big part of our experience is, even though we don't have classes and you're not in a class with other people, you're actually competing and racing against other people. So a little bit of the backstory is I really built or decided to build this product because I wanted to build it for myself. And me personally, like the class experience isn't that exciting to me. And it's not exciting to me, not just from a content standpoint, but like cardio is hard for me. Like I hate doing anything for 45 minutes, 60 minutes. Like that's tough for me. And like you mentioned, the rower is a great workout where you can do it in, 5 or 10 minutes, 20 minutes and have a great workout. A big part of our rower is that we have a really comprehensive resistance system. So it has air like a standard rower, and that gives you that realistic feeling of being on the water. The faster you pull, the more air you displace. But we also have a magnetic side that puts up to 100 pounds of resistance. So it goes super high. And we added that because we wanted like a machine that was like more high intensity focused where we can get on for 5 minutes, do some sprints, do intervals, and have that type of experience. So that's what really makes like our product different from a physical rower. It's more accessible. And our workouts are, we have the long form cardio workouts, but we have these high intensity races where you're on there for 30 minutes, 45 seconds, 3 minutes, and you're getting a great workout. And then obviously the content is super broad in terms of, streaming, classes, and games.
Yeah, right. And it's important when you think about just appealing to a broader audience, and especially in the place where it's like you said, many of these people never rode before. And certainly, I don't even think a ton of people associate it with necessarily rowing on the water. It's like maybe that's how they know it, but they've seen this piece of equipment and it's almost an entirely different experience. So then bringing those elements of entertainment and competition and gaming around it is like totally an entirely new experience, like from the ground up, which I think is super interesting. In terms of like designing and building the hardware, was that purely a figuring out who can manufacture this, developing those relationships, dealing with, as we've seen during the pandemic and still now as well, the supply chain and logistics, and like how have you navigated that?
I think in hindsight, a lot of people would say this because most people who start businesses are like pretty naive, and you're like, yeah, man, it's gonna be easy, and like I'm gonna hire people, and once we get bigger, I'll do less work. It's like never like that, right? So yeah, getting off the ground and building a hardware company is tough. Building a hardware company where you're selling a machine that weighs like 150 pounds is like stupid tough. So for like the first like year, like we were just trying to find the right partner to build the rower for us, and it was difficult. We weren't funded. We didn't really have a business, so I actually like was traveling overseas. I hired translators to follow me to like random buildings where these manufacturers were. I knocked on their doors. I was like, hey man, we're starting a business. We have this great idea. I'd love to show you our concept. So that was really challenging. But every step of the way has been challenging. So we found a manufacturer, we built the product, but even getting the product here has been like super tough. We've heard it before, but like getting the product here, I think our shipping costs have increased like 250%. Raw materials are up like at least 15 to 20%. We use pretty complex like computer system, and getting the right components in the chipsets has been tough. So balancing getting the product here and meeting demand, like all that's been quite challenging, but it's been fun.
Yeah, it's almost like, I'm sure, going through some of the conversations with investors and even yourselves as a team, it's like, oh, once we reach like this scale, the price will come down and this will get more efficient. And like, just given the state of the world, right, and everything else, like it's probably gotten exponentially harder, in fact, to do that. And now, as you think about ramping up and continuing to sell more, it's like it's a gift and a curse. It's like you got to figure out
Yeah,
how to get all this stuff here and continue to keep the supply coming in.
exactly. Yeah, like we're fortunate for us, we're like growing at an exceptional pace, but it's like really hard to like forecast what that pace is going to be. So, give people a little bit of perspective. It's not like we order a product and it shows up
Right.
a month later. Like you really order the product a year in advance. Like you need to give the factory a schedule. You're like, this is how many I'm going to order in January, February, March, April, May, whatever. And then you got to put deposits down. So yeah, like forecasting a year in advance and saying, okay, I'm hoping I'm going to grow by X 100%. And then, you're amazing if you can like sell that many, but if you're not selling that many, then now you're sitting on millions of dollars worth of inventory. And if you sell too much, then you got pissed customers that are like, okay, there's a lead time of like 12 weeks. So getting the balance right is super finicky and tricky, especially in this environment.
Yeah, I can't. It's crazy on the hardware side. It's no joke. And then, of course, there's like the content, and whether that's content coaching, whether that's content gaming. Same, I guess, same question almost, right? Like going from that place of like, hey, I know I want this to show up on the screen, and then getting there and seeing how people respond, and then iterating on that. What has the development been like on the content side?
Yeah, fortunately for us, content, like I'm really impressed with like our team and the content. It's hard for people like who haven't been following along, but we've come up with like crazy amount of updates. Like we probably push major updates faster than any other company. Like I'd even say Peloton doesn't move at our pace. So, one of the things that we've done is, obviously we're fitness entertainment, but we say we're game design, and game psychology is like at our core. And it's true because every single one of our developers is actually from the gaming industry. So we use an engine called Unity, which is a gaming engine. So like we have to hire game developers or they're not going to understand how to build on our platform. And the gaming space is like such a cool space. There's like so much there that people like don't really know, that especially from the fitness side. Like we're bringing all this like gaming like concepts and features and things like that to this side that it makes me really excited. So to give you some examples of some of the things that we do, like for every minute that you row on the Aviron, you get an experience coin, and use that coin to like unlock backgrounds and unlock characters and like new workouts. So that journey has been super fun for me. And I think, we're doing a great job. We're releasing tons of updates and people are loving the content. So yeah.
Yeah, and this might be, I think, first of all, it's like same thing back to creating the hardware to appeal to an entirely different audience. Like there are so many things that appeal to people who are already fit or already exercise or have a certain perspective, that they like going to the gym and doing strength training. They like going to boutique fitness classes, and like that's what they understand. But merging these different worlds where it's like, if you can get somebody who never rode, right? And
Yeah.
maybe never exercised, but was into gaming, and this is their on ramp to that. It's something I've been super excited about, is like the fitness industry continues to evolve, and especially people who now come to it maybe from outside that world that are saying like, hey, how do we tap into other experts who aren't just from that traditional mindset of this is exercise, this is a treadmill, this is a class. So it's super cool to see that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's tough because most people, when they see the word gaming, it's like it doesn't really resonate with them. Most of our customers aren't 22-year-olds that are buying a $2,000 rowing machine and paying a monthly subscription. They're older people, their families, and so getting that messaging right and getting that message out, and even the content, like that's what we don't just focus on gaming. We think gaming brings so much to to our fitness industry. Like you can make workouts fun by like using gaming psychology and design, but you can't just go 100% hard into gaming and just come up with games. You're not going to be able to sell enough products. So that's where we're really broad. We say we're fitness entertainment, and we try to add all these other types of content, but it all like gets pulled in using like that gaming aspect.
For sure. And then it's probably a question that maybe investors have asked, or that you've kind of talked about internally as well. And maybe definitely, right, too early to know ultimately where it goes. But is it, hey, let's take this content and apply it to every different machine and every different modality? Or is it, hey, let's have these partnerships where we plug our content into existing pieces of hardware, or maybe some combination of both ultimately? How do you think about evolving that offering?
Yeah, 100%. So I gotta like be careful of how much I divulge, obviously. But you're 100% right. And what I will say is, like, if you look at our content, it's not rowing content, right? Like throwing snowballs at wolves and stuff, or running away from zombies, or racing against Olympic athletes. We have like you can race against Olympic sprinters and Olympic boxers. Like that's not rowing. So we really can use our content, this amazing like engine that we've built onto pretty much any machine, any modality. What I'll also add is like what's interesting about the fitness industry is like up until recently, it's a very slow moving industry. Like if you look at all the biggest fitness players out there, like we'll name some, like the Techno Gym, Life Fitness, Precor. I think they make great equipment. Like I go to the gym, I love like their equipment. It's like beautiful and it works really well, but you get on their treadmill or their bike and you're like, this thing looks like it's made in like 1980s. Like you're lucky if you have some streaming services on there, but you have no profile. You can't check out your workout history. You can't like work out with other people. So that's like a little taste of like where we're seeing and where we think the future can be.
Yeah. And you don't have to say it directly. We'll definitely keep an eye out to see how it evolves, but it's also pointing towards, and we talked about this a little bit in the newsletters, like not only consolidation, but thinking about what these open platforms look like and how different players play to their strengths and leverage what they do really well and partner with other people who do other things really well. I think just after the kind of ups and downs of the last couple of years, people are starting to look around and be like, how do we work together? How do we partner with folks?
Exactly.
And what does that look
Yeah.
like? So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Probably one of the most siloed industries. Give you like another tidbit. Like if I'm a manufacturer and I want to integrate to like Netflix or create a profile or integrate to your Fitbit, like you're doing it by yourself. Like there's no like Android operating system that like kind of connects all the devices together. So super siloed industry. It's going to be interesting to see where this kind of goes.
Yeah, and let's, I guess, kind of keep that going as we get towards the end of the conversation. Looking ahead, you mentioned having raised funding. I think was it earlier this year?
December is when we raised it, and then we're raising venture debt now.
Yeah, and so potentially adding some additional funding, and now thinking about how you accelerate, both the sales aspect, but potentially other modalities or partnerships. What, from a team perspective, what are you guys talking about as like, hey, what's on the roadmap? What are these kind of milestones that you're either working towards or most excited about that we should maybe look out for?
Yeah, from like a top line business standpoint, we're venture back, which means we're expected to grow like comfortably. For investors, they want to see 150% growth every year, so 2.5x. And fortunately for us, we raised a ton of capital, which means we get to put it to work. And we're going to put it to work in, to grow that size, you need to not only make your product better. So we're investing a lot into the development side. I think our development team is amazing. Considering how hard hardware is, like the software side is just so much easier. And that's why I'm like super positive about it, because you're jumping through a lot of hoops to get that the hardware out there. But you can expect to see so many more amazing updates coming out from a software standpoint, just because we're building out that team and it's just going to get better and better. Yeah, we're really just building out the team, trying to hit these milestones, but at the same time, kind of pulling it back a bit. Like consumer sentiment is down, the public markets are kind of down, so we're not really sure what's going to happen, but we're well capitalized, and it's a balance between making sure you don't run out of money and making sure you hit these like great milestones that your investors are setting out for you.
Yeah, not definitely not an easy road ahead, but like you said, well positioned, and certainly putting that capital to work is a good place to be. For folks, and wrapping up, and we'll get you out of here on this. For folks who want to learn more, maybe check out what you have going on. Where would you point them?
Yeah, I'd point them obviously to our website. We have a lot of great content, videos on there, a lot of great reviews on YouTube. Where I encourage people to visit is actually our Facebook community or our Discord community. I know it seems a little bit strange, but like if it's a public community, so you just need to request to join. And if you're in there, you're going to really drink the Kool-Aid. Like the energy in that community, people really love the product and they love doing group workouts and racing against each other. We had last year, we had one of our customers actually tattoo our logo onto her arm because she like loves the community, loves the product, lost a ton of weight. So I think that's like a great area. If you really want to dive into who Aviron is, like join either our Discord or Facebook community and, just read some of the posts.
For sure. I hope folks do that. See what that cult life is all about, getting the tattoos and joining full force. But it was awesome chatting today. I appreciate you making some time.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.